Hello everybody, welcome to another art stream lecture. Today I will be talking about posing the figure from head to claws. We'll be covering a range of helpful basics and then diving deeper into mechanics and techniques for making your figure poses more lifelike and engaging. Alright, so first thing, let me make sure that I got my tools all set here. Alright. Here we go. Alright. So, the first things first. So we want to cover a couple helpful basics. So, some basics that help. Basics that help for posing are basically the same four basics that I covered last time. So you're going to have perspective. You're going to have anatomy. You're going to have design and composition. And you're going to have I misplaced the last one. Yeah, that's right, color and shadow. This is more about the form, but it's primarily these three that will be helping you out here. This is going to be a bonus, so if you're not so good at coloring and shading, then that's going to be just fine as far as posing the figure goes. But yeah, so I will also say that's peculiar to anatomy, body proportions. Body proportions will be helpful. And then perspective is also going to have its subgroup of foreshortening. And then designing composition. I'm going to call this section something a little funny. I'm going to call it triangles and airplane wings. And when we get to that, that'll be a little better. That will be a little easier to understand once we actually get to that point. Alright. So let's go ahead. Let's start off with body proportions. Okay. Now, bodies are different and they vary. Personally, I like to keep a range of 6 to 8 heads. So if we keep a head about this range, and this is inexact. But this can give us a rough idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I do 7, that's a fairly good compromise. Six to 8 heads, and then we'll have you'll have a head to begin with, and it will attach to a neck, and the neck will break into rib cage area, and then the rib cage area will be followed by pelvic area, and then it will be followed. Pelvic area is maybe not quite that tall, but it's still a major mass. So we're going to kind of right there. Alright. And then we're going to have our legs and our arms. And our feet as well. Alright. And then arms from the sides will drop down to about here from the hand length and cut about here, a little above the navel. For the length of the arm, for the full length of the arm. Alright. And those are some basic figure proportions. So, those are the ones that are most helpful for me to remember. So, you've got your head about midway through the head, you've got your pelvic region through down here, going to be the legs, and about halfway down the thigh area is going to be where the fingertip ends. And then also it's going to be a little bit above the navel where the elbow cavity sits. So you just have to think of that as kind of swinging motion. And then the rib cage cuts up like this to be a little more anatomically correct. And we connect it to the arms, like there, at our sternum. Okay. And then this is furry stuff, so it's got some ears. Yay! And a tail, because why not? There we go. Alright. So there's some really basic body proportions. And these areas are really learning tools. As you practice the form, you'll get more and more familiar with how things look in 3 dimensions. Because, of course, you're not always drawing the body in this particular pose, and that's what this presentation is all about. Posing your characters. Alright. 6 to 8, this is a fairly heroic looking figure. 8 can make it even more so. Or you can divide this bottom leg up and it can be a little bit more, can lift up the heels some, and then you make it digitigrade, which can be cool. That might be more what you want for your anthroform. Alright. And of course, animals vary. So pay attention to reference. Alright. So that's body proportions. A really, really quick body proportions anyways, but we want to make sure that we understand them in 3 dimensions as well. So I'm going to make a little perspective box here. And we're going to try and have this roughly the same. Let me get this. We're going to have to try and get it roughly the same. And if we're drawing it in a 3/4 angle, have kind of an idea of where our stuff will all go. Oh, that makes it a very thin form, kind of squashed. Well, maybe not so much, but I'll extend it just a little bit. Alright, so there's an idea for our figure box. And then we're going to have... I'm used to human forms, so forgive me for kind of basing it off of this. Alright, so from the top, yeah, right here, we're going to have our head space. And then about the middle, we're going to have our pelvic region. It's going to come down, and the head will kind of overlap the rib cage at this point. And if we're drawing a line straight down, there's going to be some forms about there. Alright, I'm thinking about this, continuing to think about it from, perhaps that would be a little higher. Let me draw that one out just a little bit better. It's more of a mass representing a pelvic region than an actual thing, but we're going to have that going up there. And then some basic lines, and then about halfway will be our knees. Halfway from there is going to be where our arms drop. Arms are going to overlap things because they're in front now. And then the body's going to overlap the arms from here, but it will fall at approximately the same area. So that's a good way to think about it in 3 dimensions. Little tail on there as well. But yeah, so practice doing it from like straight on, from 3/4 perspective, from the side perspective. It's going to be... the chest will tilt a little, not that way. It's going to tilt opposite direction. So we've got our head, torso. You know what? I think I might have had that right. Head's going to be forward. Pelvis is going to be back there. Forgive me if I'm speaking too quietly sometimes. I'll try to be a little louder about stuff. Alright, from here about our knee area. Digitigrade figure. Gonna have that about there. And that poses a little ski-wampus, but I'm gonna bring that back a little. There we go. Something like that. Those ears are too high, but whatever. All right, really basic body proportions. Practice those. Get those down. Body proportions and anatomy. Okay. And making sure that you're practicing the body in perspective as well. So if you can break it down into, uh, we've got this basic height measure here of 7 heads. Body proportions can range between like 6 and 8 usually, and they can range more depending on the style. Can be cartoony, can be chibi, can be whatever. But yeah, you can translate those proportions into 3D, roughly using a same guide and drawing a 3D box and trying to make sure that everything lines up in its perspective. And this is kind of orthogonal perspective, but it works for right now, for practice at least. Okay. So there are some simple body proportions, anatomy, foreshortening, perspective. All right, moving on to actual posing now. All right. So whenever you're starting out a drawing, you have to consider a number of things for posing the figure. You're going to have to consider a number of things about whatever you're drawing. So, like, if you're just starting, if you might just be drawing a posed figure or whatever, but if you've got someone specific in mind, you'll have to ask the basic who, what, when, where, why, how questions about the character. So, who the character who the character is, what their activity is, and this can also be a consideration, their location. Because how they're posed, they might not be standing on flat, even ground all the time, right? And it can be made especially interesting if they're not standing on even ground all the time. They might be standing on like broken rubble because like a building collapsed or whatever, something nice and dramatic and maybe with a bit of story in it too. You've also got your character, how their personality will reflect into their posing. I know this is done specifically in animation, but they'll do like walk cycles and they'll try to introduce character into the walk cycles. So they'll try and express the personality of the character walking through a door and sitting on a chair, because people do that differently. And if you're going to have characters, they're going to be doing that in their own ways to kind of hyper realize what type of character they are. So that it's another visual clue as to who the character is. But anyways, we're just going to refer to posing the figure from like a generic standpoint. All right, let's see here. So we're going to have to consider character, activity, and location. Does anyone want to volunteer an activity for posing? I'll give this a minute or two. What activity should our character be undertaking? You can type in the stream chat if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm just going to choose something. Gymnastics. That's a great one. Playing guitar. We can do that. We can do kind of both. Yeah. Let's do that. Those are two both great examples because one of them's still and one of them is in kind of action. So if a character is performing gymnastics, they're going to be kind of tossing their body in all sorts of ways, and they're going to be posed very dynamically. And the tough thing about posing a character dynamically is that you can't really make a model stay still for a dynamic pose. So it's important to make sure that you've got something. All right, so let's say we've got a character doing dynamics. All right. So now we're going to draw out the figure in the way that I'm most familiar. So we're going to start out with the upper torso. That's going to be our main thing. And then I'm going to have the lower torso as well. And sometimes, depending on how deep you want your action, you can overlap these as well. So perhaps we want to introduce a little more depth into our picture. So we're going to have our torso up here, which means we're going to have our neck area about here. And then we can have, so if we've got our basic torso masses down, then it's a matter of placing our limbs and our head. So if we've got the character kind of leaning towards us, we can have or a character like running towards us or something like that. We can have a number of things going on here. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with gymnastic moves, so this is just going to be kind of be all over the place. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, we'll get it. So we'll have kind of like a nice dynamic figure kind of charging out. Maybe they're running. Yeah, maybe they're running. So we'll have one arm coming forward here, and then another going back. All right. So then we want to talk about a number of things that will help when it comes to drawing the torso. This is a very important thing because otherwise we get and everything that I'm going towards is to avoid action figure syndrome. Because action figures, like even some of the best action figures out there, are still very stiff, because they don't act the same way that the human body acts. And so, like if you've got a really cheap action figure, it maybe has a ball joint at the arms here, or maybe not even a ball joint. It just has a single swinging joint that just goes up and down. And it could be the same for the leg joints. More advanced action figures have actual ball joints, and they might have extra joints and rotations at the arms and the hands. But we basically want to avoid action figure syndrome because we want to make sure that our figures are nice and organic, and pose in ways that most action figures cannot do. So for that, we're going to the two important fundamentals are tilt and twist. And when I'm talking about tilting the torso, we'll be talking about setting the shoulders one way and the hips usually the other way. And so we'll have a shorter side here and a longer side here for the torso. That's tilt. And then twist has to take into account the third dimension, right? So if we've got torso, we got shoulders rotated this way, say, and we got hips rotated this way, say. This is a rather extreme twist, but it will show approximately a similar type of shape. But yeah, then you get this nice dynamic shape that's kind of swooping inwards or showing directionality or something like that. Whereas both of these can be facing one direction. This has chest facing one way, hips facing another, and that's the twist action that we want. And most action figures don't have anything like, a twist and like that. But yeah. Alright, moving back to our figure. We could place our head in any number of spaces here, right? We could have them kind of leaning back. We could have them leaning forward. We could have their head this side or that side with kind of a stretched out neck. I kind of like this forward and slightly to the side. So we're going to place this forward and slightly to the side here. There's a little bit of a twist. It's a little bit of a twist. And then I can throw in the tilt on the shoulders. Let me draw that right there. And have our hips tilting kind of the opposite way. And then I can throw our arms out just a little bit more. That improves the silhouette of the character, so to speak. Alright. And then for the back, we're going to do essentially the same thing, but we're going to do it in miniature, because it's facing backwards. Not facing backwards. I'm having a hard time talking. But anyway, so we've got important elements here. We've got overlap with the head, overlaps the upper chest area, overlaps the pelvic area, and the pelvic area is going to have this this range here. And then we can tilt our head a little more maybe. Let's make this a furry figure, huh? And so we've got our chest facing this way, facing that way. Use some claws here. Got some basic ideas, right? Whoops. What's... Okay. My tablet did a derp there. Okay, that's not really gymnastics, but maybe let me come back to this. Let me come back to this. And then here, another thing that's important to consider, or at least is one of those tools that people have in their kits, is the action line. So let me kind of draw in red here on another layer. So like the action line of our character seems to be something like this. And there are ways that I could tighten that up using the rest of the form, or to exaggerate it a little bit. Maybe I could push the torso this way, but that can be an important kind of thing. Where that breaks down into like composition is that this action line if it's got it usually has one side that's a little more emphasized, and so for that reason it can start to look like an airplane wing, which returns to something that I said earlier. A lot of people weren't here, but that's okay. But you can see this the if you've ever had like a simple lesson about airplanes, airplanes will have one side that's very rounded and it pushes the air this way, and then I have one side that's kind of like sharper sloped. But yeah, it's a great, interesting compositional thing to use. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. All right, let me try another. I'll use a pencil this time. All right, we're going to have a figure kind of upside down. So we'll get like a torso and pelvic area, and we'll get the head down here. And then maybe we've got there we go. A little bit of a bend. We'll have our action line about there. So let me Yeah, there we go. It's a little bit more fun looking, a little bit more gymnastic looking. All right. And we can get some similar aspects in here. Have it there. Again, this is going to be kind of humanoid, so forgive me. And for here, I'll go on that way. And then maybe like that. There we go. It's a little more fluid, maybe. A little more unbalanced. There we go. That seems a little better. All right. And we've got some twist here because we've got an arm up here. And remember that the arms attach to the sternum, to the top of the sternum. The armpit is not the primary, is not the initial place of rotation, but it's one of the places of rotation. So yeah, this way we can have a more interesting type of character interaction. We've got a character who's upside down here. But yeah, that can be more like it's got a line of action and it's got kind of like an interesting flow to it. And also a couple of interesting shapes, and this is another area. I can kind of talk about it now. The kind of triangle. Whenever your figures are posed in a shape that fits like a triangle. I personally love this. Um, it might be like a little uh, cliche, but I personally love it whenever you can fit a character pose in a triangle. It's one of my favorite compositional tools. I absolutely love them. Triangles are the bomb. Yeah, drawing a pose box around this one would be not drawing a box around this form doesn't necessarily make the most sense um, because it's got because the box wouldn't help you make sense of anything that's happening here from a proportions standpoint. So I don't necessarily recommend, you know, drawing a box in every scenario, um, but it can help you when you're first learning proportions. So don't focus too heavily on on the box as something to help you with all poses, right? Use it to help you with like those more standing, more regular type of things. All right. Now I'm gonna go on to a character who's playing guitar, and we'll have them like seated on a stool or something like that. So let me just kind of edge out a stool here. Real simple kind of form, and we don't want our perspective to be too ski-wampus here. Alright. And so we've got a figure. We know where the pelvic area is going to be. It's going to be on the stool here. And then we can pose the legs in a certain way. We can have one of them resting maybe on the leg of the stool, or maybe if they're digitigrade, they'll be like that. Like that. And then maybe the other leg will be kind of bracing them like that. We'll be out towards there. And we'll just have kind of like one straight leg and one thing. That's another thing when making interesting poses is to regard the bodily symmetry, but don't make pose symmetry necessarily. So in pose symmetry, if your two arms are exactly the same length out, or if your two legs are exactly the same length out, sometimes you want that, but for the most dynamic poses, you want things to be just a little bit different. So they've got their paws out there, or claws, or whatever. We got the space here. Could be hanging out kind of like right there. Alright. And then, when someone's playing guitar, they're usually hunched over, and here might be an important distinction to where we're going to make this person like right or left-handed guitarist. So let's make it right. And so they'll be fretting with their left hand. So let's make a proto guitar kind of body. We usually have a bigger bottom. There's a little bit of body to that guitar. And maybe this one is it's not tilted right already. Okay. We're going to tilt it. Gotta make sure it's a good tilt. Alright. There we go. Car is going to be an important aspect of what they're doing. And they'll have fingers up there, kind of holding the fret with the thumb. I think good guitar form, you don't typically have your thumb out front. But people are different and they play it differently. So the guitar is going to have its funny looking head and its little knobbies. We're going to have the other knobbies are hiding behind. But yeah. Alright, and then we know strumming is going to be down there. A little out front. It's going to be a forearm. And then for the forearm in this pose, it usually goes down and then back into the shoulder area. And so in this form, we're kind of considering the torso as last, which isn't always going to be the scenario, but. And then I like the head to kind of overlap the torso to show that they're leaning into it, leaning into whatever activity that they're doing. And then the great thing about anthros is that they have tails, and you can do whatever the heck you want with those tails. Oh my god, not now. Okay. Alright. And this is maybe not the most dynamic pose, but it's got the same similar kind of elements, right? It's got overlap, it's got the tilt of the shoulders heading one way, the tilt of the hips going the other. It's got the arms in different positions. It's got maybe not so much twist with this one, but it does have some tilt at least. And so as long as you've got some tilt, that's good. This is a rather big chested guy. Maybe we could fix that, but rather broad-shouldered, big-chested guy. Might be your type. I don't know. I don't judge. But yeah. Yeah, precisely. It's kind of like a puzzle, you know. If you start out with like a specific idea for an action, you're kind of figuring things out as you move forward based on what you know already. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Sometimes drawing's just like figuring out a puzzle, like what goes where based on what you know. And so yeah, here we got a basic pose for someone who's playing guitar. Maybe. I would need to fiddle around a lot more with this, but you know, we'll get some fingers there. And knowing where the rest of our hand shape would be would tell us more where the wrist is. Very important. Wrist is super important. Make sure that you get it in there. But yeah, there's a pose that's like not exactly dynamic, but they're still doing something. And their body is still moving in a certain way. So yeah, this is super rough, and I'd have to go over it a couple times to make sure it was doing what I wanted, but good enough for an idea, right? Floofy tail. Whatever we wanted. We can dress them however we wanted. Do whatever. It can be fun. Yeah. Alright, let's see here. Did I miss anything? Would you... another thing to keep in mind is that the body has hinges everywhere, and triangle shapes happen everywhere. And so, like, the basic conception of a hinge is that you've got an angle, the hinge itself, and then another, you've got a line, a hinge, and then another line at a different angle. And the idea of the hinge is that it swings open, like one side is fixed and the other side swings open, right? So, like, say this one's our fixed in place one, and then this one can swing out, closed, and swing out some distance from, like, in a circular pattern from the hinge, which would be the radius of, like, a circle or whatever. The body is made all of these hinges, and they're going to make forms that are triangular, maybe except for when they're stretched all the way out. But if there's a little bit of, like, a overbend, there's a little bit that way too. But yeah, the hinges will make these kind of triangular forms, and that's one of the great things. That's one of the reasons that I just love triangles, right? Because an interesting pose contains hinges that are everywhere and kind of triangles that are everywhere. And so if I wanted to kind of highlight where they all were, I could get, like, so there's a hinge right here, and a triangle right here, and a hinge right here, and a triangle right here, and right here, and right there, and that's a triangle. And then from here down there, that's another one that's fitting together. And then these all together make a big one. They're kind of everywhere. Does our character fit in a triangle? Not really. Not for this one. But I mean, like, in a general sense, you can kind of find one. The tail kind of breaks the triangle here. But yeah, this is another, it's another compositional thing that you can use. And then the body itself has, like, a curve to it, so you could say, like, there's a hinge or triangle or airplane wing or whatever. Compositional tools. So use them deliberately. You can even do stuff where, like, okay, I'm going to draw a triangle out and I'm going to fit the human body. I'm going to fit a figure within it somehow. And you've got to decide what are your, like, 3 points of the triangle. Like, is this going to be a foot? This going to be a head? This going to be a hand? Figure out what that's going to be, and then get your character in that position. You can do that. And that can be an interesting little creative exercise. You can end up with some really cool poses that way. Or doing it, in the other way, with, like, a airplane wing. I'm gonna fit my character in this airplane wingster shape, which becomes pretty close to a triangle if you just extrapolate a point out of it. But, like, not all triangles need to be 100% complete, Or heck, try and fit your character in some other shape. You want to use a square? Go for it. You want to use a trapezoid? Go for it. You want to use a diamond? That's just another square. But yeah. Questions or comments from anybody? I'm going to take a little breather here. Excuse me. Thinking about applying this to ferrule, often the pelvis area is behind the torso, but you can play with how the legs are below the torso and how far. Yeah, I mean you can totally apply this to to a ferrule type drawing as well. So like ferrules will have the same uh, body masses. They're just arranged a little differently. You know, they'll have the heads. They'll have a rib cage. They'll have a pelvis. You know, they'll have these areas. You know, but the same principles can apply. You can have like long sides and short sides and try and fit this all into a triangle at some point, maybe. Maybe you've got tail bend, kind of comes out, points back, maybe. I don't know. This is just an interesting tool. You know, don't feel like you have to do anything for anyone, but you can recognize this. You can recognize the triangle as a principle of composition, right? If you're intentionally using it, you're intentionally using compositional tools of design to help your character do stuff, to help your character look nice. But yeah, this can totally apply, and same with like the this is a pretty static pose right here, but the same can go like with you can twist them a little, you know. You can twist the torso. You can place the head differently. You know, maybe it's bent down for whatever reason. You know, and then you have a head that's a little more like that, if you can see that. And that might be a more interesting pose because it's not like as straight. The hinges are limited except for the neck. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, and the spine, for example, is not. It's not really a hinge. Um, you might you maybe could consider it a bunch of like tiny hinges, kind of all strapped together. You know, and they have a very limited range of motion, but um, rather than being a two-dimensional hinge, it's a ball socket type of thing. So right, so like a spine can bend, you know, wherever 360 degrees, and it can. This is the tilt that we're talking about. So a spine can go anywhere, and here, and it can tilt, you know, left or right. You know, and it's going to be attached to a rib cage and a pelvis, and the arms will come out. But yeah, so like in general, the way that I think about like the torso and adding energy or some type of lifelike tension to it is that principle of tilt and twist, or twist and tilt, whatever you wanna call it. So angle things a little bit, just angle things a little bit more interesting right? Because I see, I see a fair amount of furry art that's just kind of like, oh, head here, torso there, legs here, right? And there's no lifelike action with these type of standstill poses, because they're suffering from like action figure syndrome. Like they've got ball joints here, and then maybe they're doing something with the elbow, but the torso is treated as just like this stiff structure made of bricks, you know, and like that's not how torsos work. Torsos are not made of brick walls. They're made of stuff that can bend, you know. Um, Maybe you've heard of the flour sack from Disney or something like that. Disney flour sack. It bends in certain ways. It flops over itself in certain ways. It's never going to be, a brick wall. Yeah. So, all right. I hope that helps. Um, any other questions, comments, concerns before I wrap things up here? Maybe a brief recap of everything that we've gone over. The basics that help for posing: perspective, anatomy, design and composition. And perspective, maybe you want to focus a little bit more on foreshortening, because the body parts can sometimes be angled towards the camera, and you'll need to know foreshortening in that case. Body proportions are always important. Design and composition, remember triangles and airplane wings. Experiment with other shapes if you so desire. Is super cool. Um, yeah, and eventually add color and shadow and bring out the forms of your stuff. But yeah, so remember body proportions. Remember, when you're posing your figure, you want to make sure that you're looking at your character, your activity, your location. Um, yeah. All right. Cool. I think I'm gonna wrap this up then. I know a lot of people weren't here at the beginning, but that's totally okay. I recorded the beginning for that purpose. I will open it up for any further questions and answers at this point, but I will go ahead and wrap up the YouTube recording. So thank you very much for visiting. If you're on YouTube, feel free to do the YouTube things, like, subscribe, whatever. Um, but yeah, I try to do these every week for the Art for Art School Discord, and I will see you all later from YouTube land, and the rest of you in Discord. I will be right here for you. Bye bye, YouTube.